guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a book review of Ash Princess by Laura Sebastian. I picked this up over the weekend as like a birthday present to myself, and it was awesome. I didn't think that I was going to love it nearly as much as I did, which is kind of weird, I guess, because I feel like everybody has nothing but good things to say about this, with the exception of a couple things. I'll get to that later. But anyway, so this is going to be like a review in the beginning of the video, and the second half, or the last part or whatever, it's gonna be like a spoilery talk because I've got feelings that I need to discuss. This is a YA fantasy that follows Theodosia, or Theo, or Thora, depending on who's talking to her in the story. And she is a princess who was essentially captured when her kingdom was taken over when she was, I think she was 6 years old, and her mother was murdered. Everybody that she knows was like murdered. That's not a spoiler, you find that out very, very early on. And like the invaders kept her so that if there were ever a sign of a rebel uprising or anything like that, they could use her and like whip her publicly to try and quell any rebellion that might start. It's definitely kind of dark. It's definitely not your typical princess YA fantasy kind of story. So like in the beginning of the story when you meet Theo, she is broken. I mean, she has been under their thumbs or whatever for, it's gotta be like more than 10 years. They probably say, I don't remember specifically, but she's been living in captivity for a really long time. And while it is kind of like a gilded cage, because on the surface level, she gets pretty dresses, she gets to like go to banquets and eat fancy food and hang out with the nobility, she really doesn't live a great life because anytime something happens, she is punished for it. I mean, she has scars all over her back from her whippings. She has to like be shamed by wearing an ash princess. She wears an ash crown at these gatherings, and she is kind of like just trying to survive at this point. And she is just kind of trying to survive at this point. She has to go through an event, a punishment that really wakes her up as to like her situation and what she could actually be doing to help. It wakes her up to the fact that she is just surviving, but she's not doing anything to really get her country back. And after that event, she kind of joins a rebellion within the castle, and you follow her from there as they try and take down the king, who is referred to as a Kaiser, and deal with like the politics while she's secretly plotting against everybody. You definitely see her go through some mature changes. I don't even know if it's really a maturity. I guess it kind of is, but it's mostly her realizing that she has had it better than a lot of her people have, because they do have slaves. Like when the Calavaxians, that's the conquering country, when they came into her country and invaded, they kind of took everybody in the country as slaves, and they put a bunch of them into mines to mine for these things called spirit gems, which people from her country can use as like a power vessel to command like basic elements. So she's really woken up to the fact that not everybody in her country is gone, not everybody has been killed, but they are being treated absolutely awfully. So for this, I'm just gonna go through like the rating system that I use, because it does kind of touch on a lot of the different aspects that I would want to cover in a book review for this. So I actually use the Caw Pile rating method from G from Book Roast's channel. I will link her video down below so that you can check it out. But it's essentially a spreadsheet where you can track your reading and your reading habits and things like that. But it also goes through a little bit more in depth of a rating system than just your average 5-star ratings. I'm sorry, there's like a ton of cars going by my house right now, which is like, it's driving me insane. It's never this busy at this time of day. But anyway, so she uses Caw Pile, which is C-A-W-P-I-L-E, and C stands for characters. So in this, I essentially rate my thoughts on the characters in the story from a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the worst and 10 being the best, obviously. And I gave the characters in this story a 9 out of 10. I thought that the characters were great. Like, I thought that she did a really great job of portraying the emotional turmoil they were all going through. I thought that they showed some really impressive growth. Nobody really irritated me with their illogical thoughts or actions to like an unreasonable level. I kind of really understood what everybody was going through. I connected with them, even though I've obviously never been in a situation like the one that they are in. I thought that Theodosia showed a lot of growth throughout the story, and I've heard that she actually gets better through the remainder of the series as well, so I'm really interested to see how she grows into her status of queen, because you really see in the beginning that she's not comfortable with that. She's not comfortable with the idea of ruling. I think at one point she even says that she never wanted to be queen. She's got the shadow of her mother hanging over her, and you can just really see how that tortures her through the entire story. But I gave the characters of this a 9 out of 10. I mean, you do follow Theo in first person, so you don't really get a look at the inner workings of like the other main characters, like Blaze or Cress or Soren. I'm probably not saying his name right. It's got like a line through the O and I don't know how to pronounce that. But their actions really convey like what they're going through at that time, and I think that Laura Sebastian does a really good job of that. A stands for atmosphere, and once again I think that Laura Sebastian did a really good job of building up the atmosphere, building up the world. I really felt like I could see the things that she was describing. I could feel like the pain that Theo was going through every time they had to punish her, or every time she felt guilty or anything like that. You could really picture what they were all going through. And so I think Laura Sebastian did a fantastic job of building up the vibe of the overall story. W stands for writing, and I also gave this a 9. I am not the most critical of readers, so I don't necessarily pick apart the writing styles of a lot of the books that I read. I either like it or I don't like it, and in this case I really liked it. I really had no problem following her. I didn't think that she was overly descriptive. I didn't think that she made any weird like word choices that confused the point that she was trying to get across. I just really enjoyed the way that she portrayed everything, and I think that she did a great job. P stands for plot. And I actually gave this a 10. I was invested. After I started reading it, I couldn't stop reading it. I finished this book in 2 days, and I was really enjoying every single second of it. I liked, like I said, I mean, I've been raving about it this whole time. I really enjoyed, there were a couple of twists that I didn't really see coming that I thought were really interesting, and Theo made some choices that I didn't necessarily think she was going to follow through on, so that kept me guessing about her character for sure. Other things I was able to predict was going to happen, so I'm not going to say that this is like the best fantasy book in the entire world. I mean, it is kind of predictable, it is a little bit tropey. But I did think that the plot was a new take on something that we haven't necessarily seen many times before in YA with the princess, where she is the one up going through torture for her people. So I stands for intrigue, and I definitely already covered this, but I was obviously intrigued by the story. I couldn't stop turning pages once I started reading it. I absolutely loved it. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen in the next 2 books in the series. Like I said, I already went out and bought them, so as soon as those get here, I'll be blowing through the rest of the series. I am so excited to see how everybody grows and changes as the series goes on, because I'm pretty sure that they get more like serious and dark as the books go on, so I'm really interested to see how that's going to go, but I am definitely intrigued, and I gave this a 9 out of 10. L stands for logic, and I gave the logic a 9 out of 10 as well, and that's essentially, do the characters make choices that make sense to the plot of the story? Do the characters, or do the plot lines make sense? Or is it something that you're looking into the like air after you're reading it going, well, why didn't they just do this instead? I didn't do that. I didn't really have any issues with the choices that they made. I don't think that they didn't make sense within the confines of the story. A lot of things they did, I kind of saw coming. Some things I didn't really see coming. There are definitely, like I said, there are some plot twists that I didn't necessarily see, but everything really made sense. And then finally, E stands for entertainment, which obviously I was entertained by this because I gave it 5 out of 5 stars in the end. I loved it. I really enjoyed everything about this. I enjoyed the characters, which is really honestly surprising to me because I went into this knowing that there was going to be a love triangle, and I don't like love triangles. I actually hate love triangles. But as far as the one in this goes, it really takes a back seat to everything else that's going on in the plot. I mean, she doesn't spend the entire time like your normal, like, fantasy heroine going, oh, am I going to love him more? Am I going to love him more? Oh, people are dying. Oh, it doesn't matter. I love these two boys. You know, like, it's not like that. She's dealing with these two guys and their obvious feelings for her, but it obviously takes a back burner to the more important things going on in the plot. She's not constantly obsessed with it, focusing on it. She's always, the undercurrent in her mind is always, what can I do to be better for my people? How can I fix things for my people? What is going to get me out of this situation so that I can take over and be queen again for my people? Alright, so that's enough of the review portion. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to read the rest of the books in the series. I highly recommend it to anybody wanting like a YA fantasy. There are some trigger warnings, I would say. There's like abuse. I think that they mention sexual abuse. I'm not 100% sure on that, so don't quote me. But there's definitely some graphic scenes like where she's getting whipped or people are dying in other ways, so I would definitely put a trigger warning out for that. So, getting into the spoilery portion of this, if you don't want to be spoiled, if you haven't read the book yet, definitely skip this part of the video or stop watching now. I'll put like a big banner here at the bottom so that you know like that's when it starts. But I have some thoughts, and I'm just gonna start out with the fact that yes, there is a romance in here, and I absolutely am rooting for one of the guys over the other. I'm just gonna preface this entire conversation with that. I want her to get with Soren. I love Soren. I think that Soren is adorable. I think that he's made some questionable choices, but she's made some questionable choices as well. I don't have anything against Blaze, and I want him to be happy, but I don't want him to be happy with Theo. So I think that a lot of the people that don't want Soren to be like her endgame, and I have no idea who she ends up with, but I am gonna be sad if it's not him. Especially because a lot of the revelations that you have about Blaze, I don't know if he's gonna make it to the end of this series, folks. We'll get to that later. But Soren is like this tortured, adorable boy who was brought up in an absolutely awful, terrible environment with a terrible father, and yet he still manages to just be a good guy. A great guy. I mean, oh my god. It absolutely broke my heart when she was about to stab him, literally stab him in the back, and he realizes it, and he goes, yeah, you should move that an inch lower. Just like, he knew it was coming, and he wasn't gonna fight her on it, and he told her how to do it better, and that was just, it broke my heart. I was very happy that she didn't kill him. I didn't think she would, honestly. That was not a surprising plot twist to me. But yeah, that was a really heartbreaking moment. And then an equally heartbreaking moment was towards the end when Soren, after she, you know, kidnaps him, when she is talking to him and he's like, was any of it real? And she's like, every time I look at you, I see your father. Like, the poor guy literally just risked his life to break you out of this jail, and all you have to say to him, I understand why she kidnapped him, okay? I understand why she, you know, had to say these things to him, I guess, but like, it broke my heart for my little baby Soren. Seeing her say those words to him just was so upsetting to me personally, and I just got done, I know, saying that like the love triangle in this takes a back burner to like the rest of the plot, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I love him, and I need him to be happy. That is all. That's all I'm gonna say about that. My other thing that I don't want to say I had an issue with it, but I was curious about it, was that I know that she shows doubts throughout the entire book about her ability to be a queen and her ability to lead and all of that stuff, and that's great, but she's still giving a lot of orders, and she doesn't really have any real-world experience, and I guess that they touched on this at one point because she said, oh, my mom raised me for 6 years, but the Kaiser had me for a lot longer than that. And that was a really telling statement, and it makes me wonder what's going to go on with her for the rest of the series and what kind of ruler she's going to be. I think that's going to be a big changing moment for her, trying to balance out like her mom's influence on her life, which was admittedly very small, but she's still a good person, versus the Kaiser's influence on her life because he was a rat bastard. But it is interesting to me to see, like, she's been locked up in this castle. Yeah, she had to take the same classes as a lot of the nobility, but she's been locked up in this castle her entire life. I just am kind of curious about where the confidence in her comes from to start issuing these orders and making these decisions for these people in the rebellion that have been doing this for a lot longer than she has, and she's just ordering them around. She doesn't really expect them to recognize her as their queen, not necessarily, but she's still issuing these orders as though she knows everything that needs to be done, and that was just an interesting character point for me. And as far as her taking Soren prisoner in the end of this, I hate to say this, but this book, it's giving me Red Queen vibes, and I can't say much more than that because I have only read Red Queen. I have not finished that series. It didn't interest me enough to finish that series. But as far as taking him prisoner and then hopefully ending up with the prince, but like obviously there's a love triangle throughout the entire thing, so I knew that Soren couldn't die in this book, but I definitely called them taking him prisoner and taking him away in the very beginning. So that was, like I said, there were a couple of plot points that you could definitely see coming. It's tropey, I'm not going to lie to you. It's full of tropes. I just think that the way Laura Sebastian executes them is very well done. It's not the most original YA fantasy that you're ever going to read, but I think she does a really good job with it. I also think that it's really interesting. I'm gonna keep talking about Soren, but I'm not gonna talk about their relationship necessarily, but I am gonna keep talking about Soren. Because if you think about it, he was kind of a prisoner to his father, not necessarily in the same way that she was, but I mean, he had his mom as like a hostage who would be punished if, you know, he ever did anything bad. He was essentially a hostage to his father his entire life. And I think that that explains a lot of the bad choices that he made, which is probably why I don't have that big of an issue with like the bad things that he does. He releases the Berserkers, which are essentially people from her country that have gone mine mad. They've been in the mines for too long and they're overloaded with magic and it drives them insane and it makes them like blow up with magic, kind of is the vibe that I got out of it. That's what I pictured anyway. And he sets them loose on this island that he's trying to like take over under his father's orders, and that's one of the biggest things that she has against him in this entire story. I mean, that happens like towards the middle. But it's like the biggest thing that she has, the reason to hate him, is that he took these people that he knew that they had been like researching and watching from the mines and he used them to kill other people. But my thing with that is that he is under orders from his father under the same threat of punishment. Like, he loves his mother and his father would and did kill his mom, and he was worried about that. He was terrified about that. And so he's essentially a hostage to his dad in the same way that she is, especially when she was under orders to kill her father in the beginning, that she didn't know, but she kind of knew was her dad. Like, I just don't understand how she can see those situations as being any different, because she was essentially told to kill her father or he would just kill them both. And so she stabbed the guy in the back, or the front, I don't know. She stabbed him with a sword, and it was pretty traumatic. That's actually not spoilery, because it happens like that far into the book. But she's under the same kind of orders, under the same kind of situation that Soren is when he's following his father's orders, and I don't think that she really holds it against him by the end of the book, but I really think she needs to do some soul searching, in all honesty, because she's not she doesn't think that she's a fantastic person, but like the undercurrent of her thoughts is that she's like better than him because at least she's not using and abusing all of these people. But at the same time, she's been living in this castle in a comfortable cage. Yeah, she gets beat. Yeah, she gets whipped. Yeah, she gets tortured. But she's alive, and she's not working in a mine, and that's not what a lot of her people can say. And then there's Blaze, who I don't know. My thing with Blaze, he kind of this is gonna sound so bad. Blaze feels kind of whiny to me in that he was like talking to her, and he's like, oh, it's so bad. Like, I couldn't even talk to you about it. You don't want to know what happened to me down there. And she was like, well, tell me what happened to you. And he goes, oh, I was locked in a cell for several days. And that was it. I mean, he worked the mine. It was bad. I'm not denying that it was bad, but she spent the majority of her life getting whipped whenever this guy wanted to whip her and torture her and do all of these other things to her, publicly humiliate her. And then he's like trying to essentially rape her towards the end, and you don't have it that bad, Blaze. That's all I gotta say about that. Okay, anyway, I have been ranting about this book for far too long. I really, really recommend it. I highly recommend it to anybody who is wanting a fantasy that's a little bit on the darker side, I definitely am interested in picking up the sequels to this, and I will be doing reviews on them as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and the subscribe button down at the bottom, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!